Hello, and welcome to the Road Show. This month's episode is called Mother Love. We're going to be talking about all of the complexities, the ups and downs of motherhood, and everything in between. So I think it's going to be a great conversation. I'm Lee Bukowski. I'm your host, and I'm very excited to introduce my panel to you today. So we have Donna Carbone. She's the award-winning author of All That Is Sacred and of Lies and Honey, both published by Red Adept Publishing. She's also the co-host of the podcast called Authors Talking Bookish, and she's our program director here at Bookish Road Trip. Thank you for all you do, Donna, I have to say. Donna also teaches English in Connecticut, where she lives with her husband and family. And so you had a long day of teaching today. So I'm happy as a recovering teacher myself. I know what it takes to do something after school. So I'm glad you're here, Donna. Nice to see you.
Thank you for having me.
And we have Kathleen Basi. She's an author and musical composer, mother to 3 boys and 1 chromosomally gifted daughter. Her novel, A Song for the Road, follows a musician on a cross-country pilgrimage to honor the family that she's lost. And she describes her fiction as meaty, earnest, occasionally humorous, and uplifting, and it highlights the best within ourselves and each other. So hi, Kathleen. So nice to meet you.
It's nice to be here.
Marlene Adelstein is the author of the USA Today bestseller Sophie Last Seen, which is her debut novel. And she's been awarded various artist residencies. Her short stories and personal essays have appeared in numerous literary journals and magazines. And you are currently at work, Marlene, on your second novel, Nora Dunbar's Apology Tour. I love that title. So maybe at the end you'll tell us a little bit about that as well. So welcome, Marlene.
Hi, thank you.
And we have Leslie Rasmussen. She's the award-winning author of After Happily Ever After and the Stories We Cannot Tell. In her past life, she wrote TV sitcoms. She's published over 20 essays for the Huffington Post. She lives in Southern California. She's married with 2 sons. And I'm happy to say Leslie is one of the very first authors I had the absolute joy to meet on my author journey. And so I'm so happy to see my good friend Leslie Rasmussen here today.
Oh, thanks for having me. It's great to see you too.
So motherhood, where do we start? I said we were talking earlier that we probably could go on for several hours about motherhood, but why don't we start with each of you just giving us a little bit of background about the book or books that you plan to talk about today, and then we'll go from there. So Kathleen, why don't we start with you?
A Song for the Road, as you said, is about a musician who's on a cross-country road trip to honor the family she lost. It's been a year. It happened on her birthday. And on the first anniversary, she sort of falls apart in a very obvious professional way and realizes something has to change. And then she discovers when she goes home that night that as she starts cleaning out the house, finally, after all this time, she discovers that her kids had written her a road trip app for her phone. And so she decides to take this road trip across the country. So this is a book about a woman who is coming to terms with never feeling like she was enough.
Yes, and we're going to talk a bit about themes and things like that. And I think that is so, and we had corresponded a little bit before. I think that's so relatable, the feeling that it's never enough. You can't be all things to all people. And I think that's a very, very relatable feeling. So we'll get into that. Donna, tell us a little bit about Lies and Honey.
Sure. So Of Lies and Honey is the story of 3 women. It's written in each of the women's voices. It's 2 time periods, the 1960s, the late 1960s and the early 2000s. And there is one dark secret that causes their lives to collide and threaten their roles as mothers and daughters.
Yes, and I'm going to try my hardest. I always try no spoilers. But yes, so there's, we'll talk a little bit about the different time periods and things like that, and how those, how the different times affect parenting and parenting styles and such.
Yeah.
So Marlene, tell us a little bit about Sophie Last Seen.
So Jessie Albright is the protagonist. She's a mother of Sophie, a 10-year-old girl who went missing from a shopping mall. never to be heard from or seen again. And cut to 10 years later at the start of our story, Jessie is trying to cope with the not knowing and this unresolved situation and the grief. She's reunited with Sophie's best friend, who's now 16. Her name is Star. And the two of them stumble onto a potential clue in Sophie's birding book. She loved to bird and kept journals. And they together go on a trip hoping to find out what happened, to get some closure, to get some answers as to what happened to Sophie.
I can feel. I mean, the not knowing, I think, is probably just maybe worse than even whatever the outcome might be. So I can feel that tension. So that's, yeah. And Leslie, okay, tell us a little bit about the stories we cannot tell.
Well, actually, both the books are about motherhood.
Okay.
The first one
That's
is
right. Yes, that's right.
Happily Ever After is about a woman who's 45 in the middle point of her life, and she's in the sandwich generation. So she's dealing with a daughter. Her only daughter is about to leave for college, and she's dealing with stuff with her husband, and she's dealing with her aging parents. So it's sort of like her just trying to rediscover who she is at that point in her life. And the stories we cannot tell is about motherhood from the standpoint of pregnancy and what can happen in pregnancies. And these two women who meet in a support group when things go wrong in their pregnancies. And they kind of go through this whole journey together about figuring out what to do with these two pregnancies.
Okay. Yes, and even though I read it a long time ago, after Happily Ever After, some of the dialogue between your character and her mother is just that you can tell that you were a sitcom writer. It's so witty and so engaging. And that's just one. It just popped into my head when you were talking about it. I can remember that.
Well, I like heartbreaking things, but with comedy in it. Just because,
yeah. I mean,
I don't want it to be so depressing.
No,
Right.
You're right. You have to. So let's talk a little bit about the inspiration for your book. So what is it about motherhood and parent-child relationships, mother-child relationships that is interesting enough to you to actually write books about it? So Leslie, let's start with you and we'll go back around the other way.
Well, for me, I mean, I'm a mother of two sons, and, you know, parenthood, no matter what stage of their lives that they're in, is really difficult. And just talking to so many friends, you know, and I hit that age where I wasn't sure. I gave up my job to stay home with my kids. And so I hit that age, and after Happily Ever After, where she hits it, Maggie, where she doesn't know what she's going to do with the rest of her life. Mm-hmm. And I've dealt with aging parents, and then and mother-daughter stuff. And then in the other book, The Stories We Cannot Tell, I had difficult time getting pregnant. So I thought I would talk to other people about this. And I found out so many people do not talk about their pregnancy stories. Mm-hmm. You know, everybody thinks it's so easy. So I thought that was an interesting way to get into motherhood also.
Yeah, I think you're right about that. I think especially when you say have people who have difficulty getting pregnant, it isn't really something maybe they're willing, you know, to talk about, or that is talked about enough.
Especially older people. I did book clubs with older women who were telling each other, people who knew, you know, this was a group of women who all knew each other really well, and they didn't know their own stories.
Wow. Isn't that interesting?
You know, that's interesting because we had infertility as well. And I think that the part of the reason that people don't talk about it even now all that much is because once you talk about it, then everybody wants to come back and talk to you more about it. And then everybody wants to tell you all the things you should be doing, because obviously you must be doing something wrong. And they don't mean it that way, but that's how it feels. And it just adds to the pressure. And then you feel like you can't go anywhere. So you're stuck in this hard place between talking to everybody too much and not talking at all and suffering in silence. It's the impossible dilemma.
Tough, and it makes you feel like your body is doing something wrong. Like you're a woman and you're not producing. So there's got to be something wrong with you.
Right. It feels like a failure. And especially probably, I think you feel like everyone around you is getting pregnant when you're trying and can't. And yeah, I agree, Kathleen, that's so true. It's this thing you really don't want to talk about, but it really needs to be talked about. And so Kathleen, let's go to you next then. What is it about motherhood that's interesting enough to you to write books about it?
It's everything that I am. I mean, if you look behind me, all of those that I'm pointing out right now are scrapbooks of family stuff. I actually am feeling great background envy because this is what my life looks like all the time. So it is the thing that gives structure to my life, and everything that I do, writing, music, writing, novels, writing, reflections of other kinds, it all revolves around that and has to be worked into that. That's like the center of what I do. And I mean, I don't even know what else I would write about.
You know, and as you're talking, and I totally agree with you. You know, it becomes your life. It becomes the center of your life. And then I think about, what about women who choose not to be mothers, which is also fine, or can't be mothers. So there's that, you know, I mean, you either have parents or you are a parent, or maybe neither. And, you know, often both. But again, it's one of those things that just comes with so many layers, no matter what your situation is. So Donna, how about you? Tell us what is it that inspires you to write novels about mother-child relationships?
Well, like Kathleen, I feel like, you know, and probably any mom feels like their children are the center of their universe. And I wanted to represent, in my novel, I have four very different mothers struggling with different things. There's, you know, one mother who's struggling with IVF, but she isn't sure she wants to be a mother. She's doing it more so for her husband. There's a teenager who gets pregnant as a teen, and I don't want to spoil it, but it has to deal with that. And then there's another mom who is like, you know, the quintessential Earth mom. From the outside, it looks like she does everything right with her children, and they are her world too. I actually read an article years ago that was about a debutante who got pregnant as a teen, and she was forced to give her child up for adoption at a time when there were, you know, illegal adoption rings rampant. And so that story just stuck with me, just the idea of her being forced to give her child away. And in the article, she eventually found her daughter that she was forced to give away. But it was just something that was unsettling to me. And so I needed to write through it to sort of try to understand it. And so that's the basis of my novel.
Okay. And by the way, my children went to preschool with all those perfect moms who do everything right that you're talking about. Just to show me up, I'm certain of that to this day. And so, Marlene, so you're not a mother, and we had this very interesting correspondence when we were talking about questions for the episode. Talk a little bit about the inspiration for Sophie Last Seen, and because you have such intricate themes that you've woven in there. So tell us a little bit about the inspiration for your book.
Well, I thought the inspiration came many, many years ago when I first moved to New York City. One of the first kind of high-profile missing child stories was a little boy named Eitan Patz that went missing from Soho, the Soho neighborhood, and there were posters all over the city, plastered, you know, on every telephone pole and in store windows. And he wasn't found for, I forget how many years, like 30 years or something. It was very long until they found what really happened. They found the person that kidnapped him and took his life. But that image of the little boy stayed with me, and I always wondered, how could a marriage survive that? And so that was sort of the germ of the idea. I didn't start the book until years later. And when I was kind of deep into the writing of it, I was at a writer's residency, and I had a dream. And I woke up from the dream. The dream was kind of telling me what my book was about. And the Eitan Pat story was like number 3. It was a list of 3 items. And the first was that it was about my own missing child, that I never had children. And even though I don't regret that, I think I have ambivalent feelings. And I was like, oh, okay, that's what the book is about. No one needs to know that reads the book. Hopefully it's a good story, but buried in there, I think I was trying to work out some of my own issues, my private therapy. So that's kind of the start of it all.
And I think that's very common as well. I think that it looks like, okay, here she is. We lost Leslie. Look, she's like, I don't know what happened. Let's add her back in here.
Thank you.
There we go. Leslie, we knew you wouldn't just run out on us.
I know. I just disappeared. And I was listening to Marlene, and it was so interesting to listen to you. I hope I didn't stop you.
No, you're fine. You're fine. That happens. No, but we were kind of just touching on the idea that often something happens. And I like your wording, Marlene, when you said that was the germ, because isn't that, it's never, I shouldn't say, I just finished my second manuscript, but I feel like it's never, boom, there's a great book, and you sit down and you do the whole thing. It's sort of an idea that doesn't leave you alone. And it just sort of, it goes from there. Leslie, were you going to add to that?
I was going to say, because one thing Marlene said that I thought was really fascinating and so true, and you said about whether a marriage would survive. And I think that's really interesting, because it's the same thing with like infertility. A lot of people don't end up making it through, and relationships come into play in motherhood too. The father can absolutely influence everything. So I thought that was interesting that you said that, because for the same reason that a kid disappears, a relationship may not make it.
It's the same thing with special needs as well. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, it really, it can strengthen the relationship, or it can destroy it. And it's often not even in control of the two people. It kind of takes on, it takes on a life of its own.
Yeah.
So, and I think you touched on some of these, but let's talk about personal experience. And you already answered some of that, but as far as personal experience in your books. So for example, Kathleen, you're a musical composer, and your character in A Song for the Road is a musician. So is that kind of like, you did that, kind of write what you know, or how did that come about?
That's actually the first time I've written a musician. I've written lots of characters before, but never a musician. And it felt right when I knew that this woman was going to be going across the country, and I had not experienced a loss like this. It's just that thing that everybody like hears in their nightmares. And so I knew that if I was going to have to dig that deeply into her psyche, then I think in the development stage, I was just like, who is this woman and what does she do? And it's got to be something that I don't have to research. I need to be able to do this. This part just has to come right out of me, because the rest of it is going to require so much care and research and thought process. So that's why I chose to have her be a musician.
That's interesting. And your character loses her husband and her children. Right.
Car accident. Yes, she loses them all. It's truly everybody's. And I'll tell you, there was a few years ago, I try to get away from the house because, as I said, with my chaos, it's hard sometimes to concentrate on writing here. So I like to go other places, and especially outside. And there is, this is going to sound weird, but there's a cemetery that's out in the middle of nowhere, very close to the horse farm where my daughter does adaptive therapeutic horseback. And I decided I'm going to go out there. It's just a little country cemetery. And most of the graves are like 1800s. But there's this one flat grave that's always got flowers on it. And it's a parent and 2 children who died in like 1997 or something like that. And that probably was part of it too. Like part of that where, like, you see that and you're just like, oh, I just can't even. And yet every time I would go there to write, I would see that. So
Yeah, and a lot of times I think it's like that. You don't even realize that that's going to be the thing that, sort of lights that spark, and that again won't leave you alone. And so, it just keeps coming back and coming back. Yeah, I totally agree. I'm, as Leslie was talking about the sandwich generation, I'm kind of in that now. So I try to take myself away to sort of self-inflicted writing retreats. But at the last one, and we're talking about motherhood, the last one, I told my family, leave me alone unless it's an emergency, all of you. And my daughter, whose baby was due in a month, I get there, and after the first day, she calls me, my water broke. And I'm like, no, it didn't. I'm on a writing retreat, and it's another month. And so, and there it is, writer goes out the window, mom, races to Boston for this wonderful birth. But yeah, it's I know what you mean by trying to just get away from trying to get away from all that, whatever those distractions might be. So Donna, you talked a little bit, so tell us, I know you talked about the inspiration, any personal, was any of the,
Yeah,
about from personal experience?
I think while the book started out with me, I always feel like there's some element in any book that I write that I'm trying to process, that I'm trying to understand. And so the idea of someone being forced to give a child away when I am a mom of 3 and they're the center of my universe, and I couldn't fathom that idea. So I needed to write about that. And, in the writing of it, the book really focuses, I think, more on mother-daughter relationships than even the pregnancy aspect. While that is, an overarching theme, I do think the mother-daughter relationships are the things that I honed in on. And I didn't realize it at the time, but afterwards, my mom was a pregnant teen, and I am the result of that. And her and my dad got married very young. She was 16 when she got pregnant. And I think part of me writing Callie's character, who to me really is the main character, was really also to try to wrap my mind around what my mother went through as a teenager. And the irony is I dedicated the book to my mother and my daughter, kind of forgot about that aspect of it while I was writing about it. And when my mom read it, she said, Donna, like, I identify so much with this book. And it was like that aha, like, oh, I kind of thought about that as I was writing it. And I think subconsciously I was kind of writing it to understand my mother's experience. And then it just kind of passed until she brought that up again. So that was kind of a neat revelation.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like accidental therapy in a way. Yeah. Yeah. So Marlene, tell us a little bit, is there anything drawn from your personal experience? You talked a little bit about when you first moved to New York and heard about the missing little boy. Is there anything else in terms of your characters that is drawn for personal experience?
I think everything I write fiction-wise, there's definitely a lot of myself. And I think with the mother, even though I'm not a mother, just dealing with the grief, kind of putting myself in her shoes. I did a lot of research just about missing children, and there's possibly a special child in there. But definitely sense of place, things I observe is always woven, it's woven in there, but it's also fiction. It's a story. Did not happen to me. I've never had a child or know anyone that had a child that went missing. So it's a combination of real, imagined,
Yeah, I think it's hard not to. I mean, and I think my second book is just out to beta readers now, but they say, oh, I really hear your voice in this character. And it's like, no, it's not me. It's not me, but you can't help it. I mean, you are who you are, and your voice, it's your writing, your voice comes out in your writing. So I totally get that. I mean, I don't have the situations that my character, in the very beginning, her husband's killed in a car accident. I've never had that experience. As you're saying, you're not a mom, you've never had a child go missing, but still I think we sort of like throw all these pieces of our lives in a pile and then just kind of pick out parts of it, knowingly or unknowingly, that make their way into our writing. It's what makes it ours, I think. So Leslie, you talked a little bit about, fertility issues and such, but is there anything else that you would like to add? Anything about drawing from personal experience?
Yeah, I mean, with After Happily Ever After, Maggie, I was at that point years before when I was trying to figure out my life, when I quit my sitcom job and my youngest was going to go off to school. I didn't know what I was going to do. So that, and a whole bunch of friends I knew who had given up their jobs. And then my father was going through not the same issues that my character's father is going through, but he was going through a lot of issues medically. And I thought that was really interesting to see the relationship between Maggie and her father and Maggie and her mother, and watch them kind of navigate going through all these issues. And then, so that kind of came from me and my friends, a lot of people. The Stories We Cannot Tell, it's not me, but pieces of it happened to me. And it comes from two different women's point of views. Mm-hmm. And I wanted to see, it's not political in any way. It's just a compassionate, emotional look. And it doesn't preach pro-life. It doesn't preach pro-choice. But it's about two women, one's Catholic, one's Jewish, and how they approach this situation from the standpoint of just going through wanting a baby so bad and something happens. And so, with Roe versus Wade being overturned, I didn't know that was going to happen. That happened like maybe 4 months before this book actually came out. So it was one of those things I was just writing because, like I said, I just didn't discuss what had happened to me 25 years before. And I just thought there's got to be a lot of people out there that do not talk about all the things that have happened to them from the standpoint of wanting to be a mother and having all these things happen. So I just thought it was something that could really be, addressed.
Yeah, and it's really interesting how you had the point of view of the 45-year-old mother and then the two women in their 30s with the very different situations and perspectives. So then what is it that you are, well, let's talk about different themes. And I guess these two questions go together. The themes in your books, but then also what is the message that you want to convey, whether it's about parenthood, being a parent, having a parent at a different, at different stages in life, or, so talk a little bit about, some of the themes in your book, and then what is it that you really want to convey about motherhood. Donna, do you want to start?
Sure. For all of my books, I try to find some kind of symbol to represent the characters. In my first book, it was sea glass and a friendship bracelet. In this book, it was bees. And so each of my characters has something to do with bees and very sort of different relationships with bees and outlooks on bees. And when I started researching, the queen bee, it's a motherhood symbol. She's gathering all her little worker bees together.
It's not just Beyonce. It's not just Beyonce.
Yeah, exactly. And so I relied heavily on my brother for that because he is actually a beekeeper. So he helped me out a lot. But yeah, I just wanted to kind of represent very different mothering experiences. And so I have 4 very different women who have different experiences as mothers and as daughters. And so all of them are, strong in their own right, but have different goals and different paths to get them where they need to be. And I think as moms, we are all different. There's not 2 mothers that you can put beside each other who are exactly the same. And that was kind of my message.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's so true. No 2 mothers. And also not only with our children, but our mothers. I think we tend to think about, we'll talk a little bit about that, as you go, an adult and then have, the relationship, how that changes with your, with your mother, with your parents, as an adult.
Yeah.
So Marlene, you worked in, as you said, Sophie's love of birds as a sort of a theme or maybe a motif. Tell us a little bit about that.
I don't even remember how that came about, but when I kind of stumbled onto it, it just felt right. And I was able to use that, kind of wove it in. And Sophie, she was probably on the spectrum, um, you know, really smart, but was difficult. So that was, but she was loved and passionate about birds. And so using kind of her birding journals was just kind of this wonderful way to keep her alive. And and because she was gone, we never really met her. I met her in kind of dreams, and the friend of hers, Star, who has her own secrets about the day that Sophie went missing. She envisions her. So that was a way to bring Sophie alive. And yeah, I was able to do research, which was kind of fun as well with the birds. Something I didn't really know about, but learned a lot about.
So you are not a bird watcher. That was
I'm not a birder. No. And what I learned back then, because now it's been a few years, I don't remember too much about what I learned, but I do enjoy it. And I watch birds, but no, I'm not a birder the way she was. She was obsessive and very knowledgeable.
But I love when I'm reading fiction and I can learn something also. I mean, I learn a lot from reading fiction, but something like that, because I don't know anything about birds. I know they tend to chirp outside my office a lot and annoy me when I'm trying to concentrate. But, I like when I can learn something like that I know nothing about. And Donna, the same thing with the bees. That was, although I've had a recent situation at my house with bees that's more Alfred Hitchcock. And I did think of you when it was going on, but it's not something pleasant I would want to put in a fiction novel. But I love that. I love being able to learn something that I know nothing about because you're demonstrating it through your characters. So what? Let's see. Who else has something who didn't answer yet? Who'd like to talk a little bit about motifs and themes? Go ahead, Leslie.
I was just going to say, listening to Donna talk about mothers and daughters, that's one thing. Like in After Happily Ever After, there's the relationship between Maggie and her 17-year-old daughter, and between Maggie and her mother. And sometimes Maggie's acting like a teenager with her mother. And then in the other book, there's Rachel and Katie, and Rachel has a really good relationship with her mother, but Katie's mother is an alcoholic. So she does not have a good relationship. So I also went into that, different mothers and daughters in different ages.
Yeah, I kind of played with the perspective of a young girl's point of view of her mother, and then understanding something about her mother differently as an adult, because that perspective changes over time as well. I know, with my own mother, you have this ideal. She's like everything when you're a child. And then there's that moment where you're like, oh my God, like she's a human being. She has flaws. She has a past. And so I really wanted to play with that idea as well in my book.
That's a good point.
Yes, absolutely. Kathleen, did you, I don't know if you had a chance to chime in on this.
Yeah, no, I think that motherhood, for me, the theme of motherhood is motherhood and womanhood, or motherhood and womanhood are very tied together for me in this book. And and there's always there's the search for beauty on the one hand, even in the difficult places. And that's something that I think is important and something that we very much lack. And so seeking out beauty, or finding, Miriam finds beauty even in this tremendous loss and in this experience that nobody wants to have to go through. So that's part of it. but also I think that there's just this sense of trying to find yourself in motherhood and the possibility of losing yourself in motherhood, and how do you balance those two things is kind of a question I think that all of us, I mean, it's dangerous to make universal statements, but I feel like that's one of that's as close to universal as exists. I feel like that's just something that women and mothers in particular are constantly trying to, self-empty, to give of yourself and to raise up your children to be the healthy and happy adults. But at the same time, like, how do you do that without carving out time for yourself and for who you are meant to be? Because what are you teaching them if you don't give that? That are we teaching them that you no longer exist, that only the child exists? And so those things are always in tension. And I think that's something that is showing up definitely in A Song for the Road, and it's showing up in the book I'm writing now as well.
Yeah, and you brought up something, and again, it's these. I'm thinking, listening to you ladies talk, it's so interesting. I'm a girl mom, so I have two daughters. My daughter now actually has a daughter, the one who was a month early, and she's the most perfect human being on the earth. But I have, my relationship with my mother. So my biological mother was an alcoholic who abandoned our family, and so I really didn't know her. But my father remarried, and that she is my mother, and I have a wonderful relationship with her. And she and I always like to talk about how we're the most evolved of everyone in the family, because we feel like we've talked about things through all sorts of stages and evolved, and but here I am at this age and have this completely different relationship with my mother, and although she did not give birth to me, could not be more my mother than had she. So I'm listening to all of you talk about these things, and it really is it's just such a multifaceted, being a mother, having a mother, all of these things. It's just, and I agree with you, Kathleen. I think whether you have children or not, I think women tend to, we can't spread ourselves thin enough for all of the things that we, think are expected of us, and really are expected of us. You had something that I thought was so funny when we were emailing, and you said one of the things in your book is with teenagers in general, how they can be. Now, I will say, having been a teenage girl, one would think that I would be an expert and I would understand how to navigate every single teenage girl situation. One would be mistaken to think that. But I love how you say they could be such twerps, but then they can just also do such really nice things. So expand on that a little bit. I thought that was great.
Well, I mean, teenagers in particular can be twerps. At the moment, my youngest is just about to turn 13 and my oldest is 19. So I have 4 teenagers.
Wow.
But and they really can. I'm very, very well acquainted with the word bruh.
You probably are bruh when they talk to you.
But at the same time, in the book, Miriam's kids, despite the fact that as you go through the book and you see in flashback the tensions and the things they didn't tell her and the things she doesn't know, and that she's tormenting herself because she should have known, things like this. But at the same time, the children loved her enough to create this app. I mean, it's no small undertaking to write a smartphone app and make it do what it does in this book. And so for her to find that, it's this gift that she discovers that her children left behind, totally unaware that they were about to lose their lives, and they left her this gift that provides beauty to her and healing and helps her to heal. And in my life, it's not nearly so dramatic, but it's little things like, the youngest one, my youngest still wants to snuggle with me every morning. And so we have like 10 minutes snuggle time in the morning, which is just soul food. I mean, I'm a touch person, so I loved babies. And I definitely don't want to go down that road again, but I do miss the snuggling. And so to still have that.
Girl.
I'm sorry, say again.
Your youngest, a boy or a girl?
Boy.
Yeah.
The
Boys
boy.
are really, really, I have 2 boys. I don't have any girls, but both my boys are they talk to me about everything, and they're both very affectionate, and they say, I love you every single time they see me or on the phone. So it's interesting because I didn't have a girl, but I wrote about a girl because I had so many friends with teenage daughters that were difficult.
I always thought I was going to be a girl mom because I'm one of 4 girls. And so
I'm
I
one of
couldn't
4.
imagine, I could not imagine having boys. And that's all. I mean, I have 3 boys and I have a very non-typical girl. She just does not do girl the way that everyone else does girls because she has the extra chromosome, and it's just a different experience altogether. But the boys have been an eye opener. They're smelly and so very sweet, and they want. And last night I was dropping off my daughter to join my son at marching band practice, and he would not give me a hug. But by golly, he wanted one when we got home.
He just didn't want anyone to see it.
Didn't want anyone to see it. He had a friend chasing him around, telling him to give his mother a hug. It was
I worked with a woman who said raising teenagers is like being pecked to death by chickens. And it's kind of true. And, you know, I think it's one of those things that we were talking about too. I think even if you don't have children, as you age, I think there are times where you stop and kind of look back at yourself as a teenager and as a 20 something and as a third, and, you know, I think, I think it causes us to think about, you know, that relationship with our own parents and how that changes, and maybe gives us a little bit better understanding, you know, of, you know, we grew up in a different time. I think I can kind of lump us together. You know, we're certainly not in our 20s or 30s. And parenting, you know, I think one of the hardest things is, you know, that, and I was going to ask all of you this. And again, Marlene, even not having children, obviously with your own parents, the difficult, what do you find to be the most difficult thing about parenting or stage of parenting? For me, I always felt like it was being my daughter's friend. You know, at what is the point where you feel like you can be their friends and you don't always have to be their parent? And, you know, a very wise person once told me that if your teenagers don't go to bed sometimes mad at you, you're doing something wrong. You know, and I grew up in an era where you know, I'm Italian, and my parents, they didn't care if I was mad at them. You know, it was just sort of, you know.
Do you think they really didn't care? Or do you think that they just managed to cover it up? Because I go to bed an awful lot going like, oh, they're mad at me. But, you know, you don't let them see it.
I think it would crush my dad more now if I were mad at him than it would have when I was a teenager. Honestly, he has softened considerably. Not that he was, you know, terrible, but, you know, it was just a different way. And I think especially because some of my kids' friends' parents really wanted to be their friends when they were 12, 13, 14 years old. And you know, that's not the time to be their friend. That can come much later. So what do you think, Marlene? I want to start with you and thinking about your own upbringing and growing up. And what do you see as, I always think to see, look how relaxed Marlene looks. Girls, I would venture to say it's because she doesn't. I always say when you don't have children, you're very relaxed and you're probably a bazillionaire. So congratulations on that. But so just tell us a little bit about, you know, because you have, your book certainly deals with this complicated grief and you know, coping with the loss of the disappearance of this girl. And you, as you said, certainly nothing as dramatic as that. But what do you think, even thinking about growing up, what do you think is probably the most challenging part of parenthood?
That's a good question. I'm not sure. I watch some of my friends that have kids, and it just seems like such a different time now. So I can't relate to a lot of what you guys are saying because I haven't raised kids, and I just wonder how my friends do it because it's so different. It seems from the outside so different from when I was a kid. And now the issues are really different, and all the gender issues going on, and the anxiety and the pandemic. And so it just seems like there's many new layers than when I was a kid. And, you know, my relationship with my mother wasn't the greatest. Both my parents are gone now. So what's closer to me now with my parents and in my thought process is dealing with them when they were elderly.
Mhm.
So that's playing a bigger part and kind of taking up more space than when I was younger. Although I definitely think back, to that. So yeah, I don't know if that answers your question.
No, it does. It does. And I feel like an old lady to say this sentence, but I do feel like things were much simpler when
They
we
were.
were growing up.
Mm.
Whether you have kids or you don't have kids, we all, like you said, Marlene, we all live in this world. We see everything, and it just seems like everything really, there are so many more layers and things have gotten.
Technology and
Mhm.
cell phones, just that alone is just adds so much different
Yeah, that
layer.
we can't even,
Mm.
and you'd feel like an old person to say, when I was a kid, but it's so true.
Mhm.
It's so true. I love the memes on Instagram that say, parents today, text me when you get there. Text me and let me know who's driving. Text me, let me know when you're coming home. And then parents in the 70s were like, bye.
Just disappeared, and our parents just waited for us to come home.
And they just assumed, and luckily, it, most of the time we did. But I know there are these terrible cases of missing children. But yeah, I mean, it was just a completely different time.
Mm.
Leslie, what do you think about that? When you think about the challenges of parenthood, how you parent, how your parents parented you, what do you think is the most challenging, and what do you do differently?
It was challenging for me because my mother seemed to be like Superwoman. She had dinner on the table every night. She had jobs. She was always home for everything. She made sure she knew what was going on with us. And when it came time for me, I was just like, you know what? I want to just be there to raise my kids, which my mom did. But she also had my grandmother and relatives.
Mhm.
And I didn't have any of that because my husband's family was in Connecticut. My family moved away. So I didn't have any help. So I
Mm.
left my job. And as far as just how different I am as a parent, I talk to my kids more than my parents ever talked to me. I didn't tell my mother anything. I tell her more now than I ever did as a teenager or a young adult. And my kids tell me everything, sometimes way too much about what
Sometimes more than you want to know.
they're doing. I know everything. My friends would call me and say, "What's my kid doing?" My son's.
Wow.
So I don't know if it's just, I think I'm more relaxed as a parent, and my mom was so busy trying to get everything done. But when you brought up before about taking care of everybody, that really hit me hard because I felt like I did that. My whole parenting job was to take care of everybody
Mhm.
until one day when my kids were like upper high school, I just went, I'm done. Everybody does their own laundry. I'm not buying everything. You have cars, go pick up this stuff. And it just was such a relief
Yeah.
to say, you know what? I can take care of myself now sometimes.
Yeah.
You know?
And the sun came up the next day, and
They took care of
everyone
me.
survived.
Yeah.
Kathleen, what do you think about that? What do you think is the most challenging? Now, thinking about, your own parents and now parenting your children, what do you find to be the most challenging aspect of parenthood?
Well, I have a couple of I have a bunch of thoughts, and they're not connected. Witness what it's like to talk to Kathleen Basi. We'll see what I can get through. I think about my mother's mother had 10 children, and she did everything. She had the dinner on the table. She did not have a job, but she ran people around, got them meals, got them to where they were going, often with curlers in her hair. It was the center, and she truly did pour herself out. And my mom, I think, was trying to live up to that. She was a farm wife, and I remember sitting in trucks waiting to dump grain during harvest season, and that's all she did. When she had the little kids, that we would go with her because we couldn't be left at home, and we'd just sit in lines because she couldn't help in the fields. I am not that. I have struggled with trying to have a career of my own while also being an at-home parent and trying to do everything. My husband has had a very intense job until the last couple of months. And so we had a very traditional division of labor. And so, I don't know, this is all the things that are coming around in my head. And in some ways, for me, when I'm trying to write a mother who actually works outside the home, I have to remember that that mother does not see the world the way that I do, where it's my job to do all of these things because that's how my life has been structured. That's interesting. I think the hardest thing about parenthood for me has been the pandemic. We had one set of parents who tried to say, "Oh, yes, we've all been there where you are." And I was like, "No, you aren't. You never went through a pandemic with kids at home." And one of them was special needs. And so that was, but also the pandemic was really good for our family because it brought to the surface things that might have stayed buried for the rest of our lives, and just that it couldn't stay buried anymore. And so I think we are a healthier family mentally, emotionally because of it, because we had to confront the things. Anyway, that's a lot of unconnected things.
No. I mean, these are your experiences, and we're talking about parenthood, and, I think they're very, very relevant. Donna, bring us home. Tell us what you think, or, thinking about either your relationship with your own parents or your relationship with your children. What are your thoughts on the challenges of parenthood?
The challenges of parenthood. I think the most difficult stage for me was when my kids started going off to college and trying to recreate my identity without them. I, really built my life around them, but was also a high school English teacher at the same time. So I worked full time, but then everything else I gave to my family. And so when they started going off to college, I just kind of felt, almost like I was going through a little grieving period. And I thought back to when I had kids and that, like, oh crap moment, like, what did I do? When you first have kids and your whole world turns upside down and you're thinking, how am I ever going to get through this? I kind of had that same moment in reverse when they left, but that was also the time I kind of did what Leslie did. And I was kind of like, okay, it's my turn. And, I have one child who still lives at home, and I have another who is back home temporarily because he's looking for a place to live. He just moved back to the state. And I feel pretty free, like I have established new boundaries, but it took me a long time. And that's kind of when I got serious about my writing career too.
Yes.
Is when they went off to college. I just decided, okay, I've given these years to my kids and my family, and now it's my time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Kathleen.
I just wanted to, that was interesting as you said that, Donna, because I think a lot about the empty nest. There were a lot of works when I sent my first off to college, but now not at all. He's, and so I never have, but I've still got 3 at home. And part of it is that we've got one child that I don't know will ever leave home.
Right.
And we're trying to figure out how we can go walk the Camino de Santiago, in 7 or 8 years and have her be okay. So it's that I just wanted to bring that up because that's like a totally different constellation of parenthood here.
Yeah.
It's fascinating. And my daughter, we talk about this, she's very capable, very in control. She has a great job. But then, you have a baby and, you buy a car and you get a book with about 100 pages of instructions, but you have a baby and you leave the hospital like, here's a human being. Good luck. Take it home and keep it alive. I mean, it's really a very daunting thought.
Yeah.
Well, the hour is almost up. We could probably talk all day long about the topics. Your books, I've read some of them. The other ones I've ordered, and I cannot wait to read. They all sound like very, very beautiful stories. I always like to end, first of all, by thanking all of you for being on the road with me today. But then also, I would like you to please tell our viewers and your followers, well, I guess your followers know, but please tell our viewers where we can find you and what you are currently working on. Kathleen, let's start with you.
You can find me on Instagram or Facebook or Substack. Just look up my name. I'm everywhere. Okay. And I am working right now. My agents have a book, which is very close to my heart. It's set on a farm in central Missouri. And I'm working on drafting another book, which is about a mother who disappears for 12 years and then what happens to the family when she comes back.
Oh, so interesting. Okay, great. Donna, tell us where we can find you and what you are working on currently.
Sure. You can find me on my website at www.donnanormancarbone.com, and that's my handle for all of my social media as well. I just finished book 3, and it's in the hands of beta readers right now, so I am waiting for their feedback, and I'm excited to get that going.
We will look forward to it. Does it have a title?
Yeah, I don't want to say right now.
Okay, perfect. No problem. Marlene, where can we find you and what are you working on? I know I did mention that you're at work on your second novel. If you want to just give us maybe a little tease about that.
Yeah, well, you can find me. I have a website with my name, MarleneAdelstein.com, Instagram and Facebook with my name, and there's links on the website. The next book is about an unlikely friendship between a woman who's not a mother, a middle-aged woman who's a writer, blocked writer, and friendship she has with an octogenarian abstract expressionist painter. And there's mother issues in there too. Not good mother issues, but plays a part in there.
That sounds fascinating. So we'll wait for that. Leslie, where can we find you? What are you working on?
My website is lesliearasmussen.com, and my socials, Instagram is Leslie R. Author, and Facebook is Leslie A. Rasmussen Author. I just finished my 3rd book, and I had it edited and everything, and it does deal with motherhood, but it's kind of like commercial fiction with mystery. So there's a little bit of something else in there.
Okay.
And I'm sort of drafting an outline for my next book, which I probably will be a rom-com. I just haven't decided.
Okay, great. You never know. It could start out as a rom-com, and then you just never know. Sometimes at 2 a.m., then something else comes to you.
I know, but I'm kind of, because my 3rd book also deals with big issues. I'm kind of tired of big issues, so I'll just do something more fun.
Light.
Something a little calmer.
Yeah.
Well, again, thank you so much for joining me today. It was a fascinating conversation. I really enjoyed it, and I hope we'll stay connected, and I'll see you soon.
Thank you
for having us.
Thank you.
Bye.